As Bishop and Rainbow savored their last moments together, they sat close, next to the warm radiator, as the night loomed over the hospital. He was reading a book that he had picked up from a nearby bookshelf. It was about the Civil War. It had been an interesting read, plenty of action, morals, and important messages, which Bishop could relate to. As his eyes began to tire, he glanced at the clock. 9:10 p.m. Only 20 minutes to go. As much as he wanted for them to spend another hour together, he knew that hour would soon turn into 2, then 3, until there was no way he could possibly let go of her. He was barely keeping his composure as it was. When Bishop stopped reading, he was only just noticing that his trouser legs were soaked with tears. He turned to Rainbow Dash. His heart sank. She was on the verge of breaking down into tears too. He reached his hand up before gently stroking her cheek. Once again, she stood up before embracing his warm body. She glanced up at the clock. 9:30 p.m. Time's up. I'm sorry, Rainbow. It's time for you to go home. Rainbow squeezed tighter as Bishop stroked her back. Her wings were still burning with fatigue as she rested her head on his shoulder. A thought then came into her mind. She pushed herself away, looking at the floor, thinking of what to say. Rainbow? What is it? She opened her mouth, but hesitated. She then looked up into his eyes, before saying in a quiet tone, "Come with me." Bishop recoiled slightly. His heart skipped a beat, and his eyes widened as his mind tried to clarify what she had just said. What? He sputtered, in a dumbfounded look on his face. Rainbow Dash stood closer, looking at him with pleading eyes full of salty tears. Come to Equestria with me. Please. You don't have to stay here. You don't have to fight here anymore. There's no need for you to be sad anymore. You can be happy again. He wasn't mistaken. She had actually asked him to come with her to her world. He stayed silent, only the ticking of the clock ringing in his head as he was forced the next sentence from his mouth. Rainbow, I'm sorry. I can't. Why? She said, her voice barely a mumble. I can't run away from this. I can't leave. I just can't. Please. Rainbow choked through her tears. Don't stay here and fight. Not anymore. Please. Don't fight, please. I don't want you to die. Rainbow tightly held Bishop as she buried her head into his chest. Bishop placed a hand on her mane, gently stroking it, as she cried openly into his bandages. I'm sorry, Rainbow, but I can't go with you. I still have a duty to serve as sergeant. I know it's tough, but your friends need you in your world more than I do. But I don't want to go without you, she cried. Bishop began to tear up as he watched the Pegasus ball. All the memories of this war, all the pain he'd ever felt, and the people he had lost were nothing but memories on paper. And now it was only a matter of time before he'd have to say goodbye again. Using almost all his willpower he had left, he tried to stay strong. Just then, Bishop saw something in the corner of his eye. He saw his journal sticking out of his backpack, tears now freely flowing from his eyes. He slowly pushed Rainbow Dash in front of him, looking into her eyes. Stay here for a moment, he whispered. The Pegasus wiped the rivers of tears from her eyes as the sergeant stood up, also wiping the tears from his face before he made his way to the bag. Rainbow Dash could see the sergeant beginning to crack. Despite his rough appearance and his usual strict attitude, even he was finding it hard to control his emotions as he grabbed the book and let out a quiet sob before he walked back to sit by her side again. He held the journal by his knees, staring at the dirty cover, small drops of blood and dry tears covering the edges. "What is it?" Rainbow asked with a weak mumble. "It's my diary. In my spare time, I'd just start to write in it. What happens in a day, or what I'm thinking. It's not much in reading material, and it's a bit worn, but if you want it, you can have it." He passed the book to Rainbow Dash. She slowly pulled it from his grasp before holding it close to her chest. She gritted her teeth. It was all happening so fast. She just wanted more time, but deep down, she knew it was best. She looked up at her hero, giving an obviously fake smile. The sergeant reached across the bed, grabbing the golden necklace before holding it onto his chest. Rainbow watched the element as Bishop opened it. "Are you ready?" Rainbow Dash nodded. She slowly walked towards him, holding his journal tightly as she sat in front of him. The sergeant's eyes were sore and bloodshot, tears pouring out of them as he used all of his willpower to attach the necklace around her neck, and he looked deep into her eyes. Click. Nothing happened. Bishop checked again before looking back into Rainbow's eyes. "Rainbow? Are you okay?" A look of horror spread across her face. Bishop felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end as the room was turned cold. Just then, Rainbow Dash slowly rose into the air. Her wings weren't moving. An unknown force was hoisting her body through the air. Bishop watched as Dashy turned limp, dropping the journal to the floor as she closed her eyes. "Rainbow!" Bishop jumped to his feet as fast as he could, grabbing the journal, but before he knew it, his body was thrown across the room. Excruciating pain throbbed throughout his entire body. Looking up and shielding his eyes from the blinding light consuming the entire room, it was followed by a deafening boom. "Is she going to be okay?" Rainbow was conscious, but her eyes wouldn't open. Her tortured body ached as she tried to move. Tired, disoriented, and confused, all she could manage was a faint twitch in her right wing. Did she just move?" The Pegasus recognized the country tone in the voice coming from her left. Her heart soared as Applejack's voice became music. With one hearty groan, she used her newfound strength to lift her left hoof towards the noise. "Oh, Ma Celestia! Girls! Girls! She's awake!" Rainbow heard the gallops of her friends running towards her. She immediately felt relief to hear the voices as they babbled around her. The smell, the feel of the air, and the warmth, it felt just like home. Rainbow Dash coughed, silencing the ponies around her. Where am I?" Dash grumbled. Why can't I see? Where's Bish?" You're in a hospital in Canterlot," she heard Twilight say, in joy from her right. "You can't see because there are bandages covering your eyes. It's precautionary. We're so happy you're okay, Rainbow. You were in a coma when we found you." Where's Bishop?" Rainbow Dash felt some pony jump onto the bed. She didn't have to think twice to know it was Pinkie Pie. Rainbow Dash could feel her strength returning as she grew more and more frustrated. "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you're back. I know I had to say goodbye to you that day. You see, I always get the..." Before Pinkie could finish her sentence, Rainbow Dash slammed her hooves on the bed, knocking the wood frame as she growled, instantly silencing the room. Only then was she reminded of the excruciating condition she was in. "I said, where's Bishop?" she choked. She gritted her teeth. Her chest felt like it was burning. As she listened to the silence, she suddenly felt guilty for shouting at her friends. She didn't say anything. She just sat back, waiting for the inevitable answer. Who's Bishop?" Twilight said, breaking the silence. Rainbow Dash turned onto her side, feeling the warm glow of the sun shining through the window, as she curled up on the bed, pulling the sheets over her. "Never mind," she muttered. Her friends looked amongst themselves, confused and saddened. Applejack walked around the bed, before sitting close to Rainbow Dash. "What in Equestria happened to you, Rainbow? Who? What monster did this to you?" Dash let out a quiet sob before covering her head, openly crying into her forehooves. Applejack was devastated. She began to break down into tears as well. Never had she seen Rainbow Dash, one of the most daring and bravest ponies she had ever known, reduced to a sobbing mess. Applejack placed a hoof on the Pegasus' shoulder, her mouth quivering as she tried to stay strong. The rest of the main six was soon gathered around the bed, sharing the emotion with their lost friend. Rainbow Dash couldn't stand the pain. Her salty tears soaked through the bed bandages and dripped onto her stitched wounds. Her face throbbed with every move she made with her face. Her whole body was shaking instinctively, and she felt cold. Being reunited with her friends was not the loving, joyful experience she craved for. Instead, she felt empty. She was home again, but Bishop was still in that gruesome war. She never even had the chance to say goodbye. Dear Princess Celestia, it's been 3 days since Rainbow Dash came back to Equestria. I knew that it wasn't going to be easy, but I didn't think it was going to be this difficult. Over the past few days, she's been distant. When I see her, it's almost like she's not in the room with us. It pains me to think what kind of ungodly torture she went through in that world. Her wounds are healing okay, but I can see the damage isn't physical. Whenever she does speak, it's always about someone called Bishop. Who he is, she hasn't clarified, but I'm guessing he was someone who she cared for. She's going to be discharged tomorrow, but she's going to be under 24-hour observation. She's going to be stuck in her house for quite some time, if the doctors get their way. Knowing Rainbow, she'll probably try to ignore them and fly around Ponyville. At least, that's what I'm hoping, because it'll mean she's back to her old self again. Hoping to hear from you soon. Your loyal student, Twilight Sparkle. As the morning sun rose in the horizon, Rainbow Dash was woken up by the faint beeps of the machines wired to her. Her eyes fluttered open. The bandages were removed when she left the hospital 4 days ago, but the light still punished her senses every time she blinked. She took a moment to look around. Her home was left just the way it was when she disappeared. All the furniture was left just as it was. All the pictures of her friends were on the mantelpieces. And to the left of them was her cherished Wonderbolts poster, signed by her idol, Spitfire. "Never lose faith, kid," she read, smirking slightly as she did. Heaving herself off the bed, she could hear her helper in the kitchen. After adjusting to the ground beneath her, she started to limp towards the commotion. A few painful steps later, she was in her kitchen, looking at the busy mare making breakfast. The pearl-colored pony then turned with a bowl in her hooves as she stirred the mixture inside of it. She caught a glimpse of the beaten Pegasus in front of her before she recoiled at the sight. "Oh my, you scared the life out of me," she nervously chuckled. "Thanks," Rainbow said blankly before sitting down to the floor. "What are you making?" "Just some pie for supper. Your friend came by this morning and dropped off a basket full of apples for you. Don't forget your painkillers, Dash." "You know, you should go back to bed. You do need your rest." "I'm fine," she grumbled. "I just want to walk for a bit." The nurse didn't argue. She gave a concerned look before turning back to the stove. Rainbow Dash then stumbled towards the front door of her house. The white Pegasus watched as Rainbow slowly made her way towards the door. Before long, Rainbow was staring out the window of her house, watching the world go by. Every pony was happy, going on with their days. Rainbow Dash turned away, walking back to the kitchen, where she saw the glass of water and the yellow capsules next to it. Slowly and steadily, she lifted a shaky hoof, reaching out for the liquid. "Rainbow!" Bishop's voice echoed off the walls of her home. The sudden shock caught the Pegasus by surprise. She darted her head to the left and then to the right, but no one was there. She started to shake as a dull throbbing pain began to throttle her senses. Then a sudden flashback knocked her to the ground. Ugh. Her mind became awash of violent images. She saw that the dark and cruel world. Groups of men being mutilated, blown up, and burnt. It was all coming back to her, as if she was there again. She could feel the heat from the fires she ran from, the blood of the other soldiers coating her body, her wings being pulled and almost being torn off her body. What's happening to me? The sounds of screaming starting to grow louder. The pain was getting stronger, the heat was getting hotter, and she began to shake uncontrollably, gritting her teeth. Rainbow Dash grabbed her ears, pressing them hard against her head. Stop it! Please stop it! It didn't stop. It grew worse. The pain was indescribable. Her whole body began to spasm as her senses were pushed to the limit. Stop it! She felt herself being bombarded, both physically and mentally. Each painful blow as powerful as the pain she remembered. Being beaten, both her body and her mind. She kicked as hard as she could, flailing wildly as she gasped deeply. Leave me alone! Silence. Everything had stopped. No pain, no visions, no noises. Nothing. Rainbow Dash opened her eyes. She found herself stuck in the black void, like she was before. No gravity, no colorful ponies, nothing. She found herself floating in the perfect definition of nothing. Where am I? She sobbed, her mind still burning like nothing she had ever felt before. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't move her hooves. She stayed there, floating in blackness, and she began to panic. Am I dead? She tried once again to lift her hoof, but just like before, her whole body felt like it was made of lead. She laid there, waiting, and waiting, waiting to wake up, waiting for something to happen, waiting for anything. Just then, she caught a glimpse of something in the distance. A light. Why me? The light slowly started to grow brighter. Rainbow Dash closed her eyes, praying it was just a weird, messed up dream. Her heart began to pound against her chest. Her shallow breaths soon turned into large gasps as her body grew cold. As she shivered, she could feel herself being pulled closer towards the light. Something felt familiar about it. She could feel her strength returning to her legs, and she looked down to see that all the wounds on her body had disappeared. The light grew lighter, warming her body, and she began to reach out. The unknown force, pulling her, was growing stronger, and she heard Bishop's voice echo in her mind. It's okay, Rainbow. You can go home now. Bish? Rainbow. Bishop! It's me! Rainbow! Bishop! Rainbow Dash reached out with her hooves, until they disappeared into the light. Suddenly, she felt a solid mass in her hooves. Tears pouring from her eyes, she pulled with all her might, feeling whatever she was holding slowly come closer and closer to her. The blinding light burned her eyes as she squinted. With one last heave, she pulled the anonymous object from the white abyss, feeling the pain slowly returning. Rainbow! Bish! Rainbow Dash began to fall from the light and back into darkness, still holding something in her hooves. She lifted the heavy item to look at it, but her eyes grew heavy and closed before she could see what it was. Rainbow Dash opened her eyes to see a feston of blurry colors in front of her. She grunted as her vision cleared. She could see she was in the hospital again. The persistent beeping of the machine. The same nauseating smell. What happened? Rainbow's vision cleared. All her friends were standing, looking down on her. Once again, looking concerned and frightened. Twilight slowly stepped forward, resting a hoof on her shoulder. Are you okay? I'm fine. What happened? Your carer called for help when you fell to the ground and started screaming. When we got to you, you were unconscious. We brought you back just to be safe. You suffered some minor brain trauma. You really worried us for a moment. Rainbow Dash looked down to see an oxygen mask on her muzzle, the tight elastic straps pressed against the wounds on her bruised face. Wincing, she turned to her left, closing her eyes. It was just a dream, she said, with a mixture of relief and disappointment in her voice. It's okay now, Dash, Applejack said. We're with you now. Everything's gonna be okay. I'm sorry. Sorry? Applejack said. What in the hell are you sorry for? For being such a jerk. I'm sorry. I haven't been myself lately. I'll tell you guys everything. I promise. You... Twilight started, on the verge of tears. It's okay, Dash. Any pony who had gone through what you did would be the same. It's clear you went through a rough time. You don't need to be sorry for anything. We are your friends, no matter what. Rainbow Dash sighed, feeling the warm sense of comfort as she had craved for so long. Thank you. Rainbow Dash opened her eyes. Then they got wider and wider. The ponies surrounding her could see the look of horror spreading across her face. Rainbow Dash began to breathe heavily. Her chest heaved as her gaze would not be broken. Rainbow, what's wrong? What's wrong? Applejack said. Rainbow Dash began to shake. Twilight turned around. Nurse! Help! Rainbow Dash didn't blink. She just looked away for a second. She didn't look away for a second. The heart rate monitor went haywire. To her left, on the coffee table next to her bed, was the blue, blood-stained book that was Bishop's journal.